Hi there. Welcome to our continuing study on time management for pastors. We hope that this has been a good investment of your time so far and that you're able to apply some of these ideas to make yourself a more effective minister of the Word of God. So, in brief review, we have been through the importance of keeping some kind of a weekly planner, whether that's digital or physical. Finding the planner that fits your needs is going to be really important in effective time management. Taking your weekly assessment time, making sure that you take some time to really think about what it is that you're doing and what was effective and what was not effective and what was maybe a good choice or a foolish choice. Priorities, figuring out what the Lord really has for you to do as a pastor and understand that. We could direct you to our ecclesiology course if you have questions about that, because obviously there's a lot of cultural ideas that affect what we might think of as our pastoral priorities when the Lord's Word has a lot of clear guidance on it. We talked about the importance of investing in your leadership as a need to build up the resources that the church will require to continue to grow and serve, because one person can only have so much influence and impact, whereas if you're investing in others who can invest in others, you multiply, you even exponentially impact that. Last session discussed the importance of delegation, right? Of not trying to do everything yourself, but rather identifying which tasks are important and how difficult they are to complete, and then finding the person who can take that and be delegated that task so that they can do that for the glory of God, be included in the church, and also free the pastor up for the important work that he has to do. And now today's session is on the tyranny of the urgent. And the tyranny of the urgent is a term that we've coined from the excellent booklet written by Charles E. Hummel. And this is one of the things that we're going to encourage you as a part of this course to read as a part of this module. It's very short, it's a booklet sized. It wouldn't take you, a half an hour to read, if even that. But it's Tyranny of the Urgent. You can find it digitally on Kindle and various other forms, and certainly you can buy PDFs from Nav Press or Ivy Press. This is InterVarsity Press. So you may be able to find various ways to interact with this. Well worth buying. If you buy a pack of 5, you'll undoubtedly find many people to share this with. So well worth looking at, and reading that will be part of your assignment if you want to think for this module. But he writes, an experienced factory manager once said to me, "Your greatest danger is letting the urgent things crowd out the important." He didn't realize how hard his advice hit. It has often returned to haunt and rebuke me by raising the critical problem of priorities. So again, you will note that we've already given some attention to priorities, and that was more on the philosophical side, your dedication and making sure that your life follows up with this. So this is kind of, in a way, part 2 of that priority discussion, and want to encourage you to think about this very seriously. Another great quote from Hummel is, "The problem is that many important tasks need not to be done today or even this week. Extra hours of prayer and Bible study, a visit to an elderly friend, reading an important book, these activities can usually wait a while longer. But often urgent, though less important, tasks call for immediate response. Endless demands pressure every waking hour." This is, again, as he already said, a haunting kind of reality, is that there are so many things in life with our, constant accessibility that can jump up and interrupt and keep us from those important tasks. If you, as a pastor, are not being intentional about your time of devotion, your Bible reading, your sermon preparation, those important things always feel like they can be pushed back or scrunched up into, the wee corners of your life. And urgent tasks, people who need your attention right now, or tasks that seem like they need to be done right now but aren't really that important, can easily keep us from being truly effective as pastors, as ministers, as missionaries, and leaders. And the big problem of this is constant availability. In a modern world, between cell phones and every other available gadget, computers, telephones, we are always available, right? When the telephone became commonplace, people mourned the loss of privacy. It's almost funny to think, right? But it was really true. There were folks who, now having a telephone in their home, felt like something that was theirs, a space that was absolutely, their sanctuary, in a way, was being stolen from them. And now, all of a sudden, everyone or anyone in the world who had access to a phone could break in through the walls of your house and demand your attention. And how does the phone let you know that it needs to be answered? Well, it used to have that bell ring, 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 something that would sure to break your concentration, get your attention, its design, but break your concentration. And now, all of a sudden, anything that you were doing, whether that was just resting or relaxing, could be easily disturbed by anyone else's crisis or possibly just boredom. And that was a big change in life. So if the phone can ring at any time, we start to feel it must be answered. You can't not answer the phone. That's absurd. And that is an ideology or thinking that we need to challenge. So now with computers and cell phones, we don't even have the slightest hint of personal privacy. Many people will even bring their cell phones into the bathroom. Any given moment that could be in any way private. The phone is next to your bed. The phone's next to your, in your pocket, on your hand, wherever it is. It seems as if we are in a situation where we are constantly accessible at every single moment. And the concept or the idea of personal privacy or the ability to be away from those distractions seems unthinkable, right? If someone calls on their cell phone, there's oftentimes just an expectation that of course you're going to answer. You couldn't possibly be busy. My most important thing is, right here on the phone or at the door. So we can be accessible at any time. That is now a new possibility, and maybe for the most extroverted of extroverts, that's just the best thing they ever heard of. That they never have to worry about being inaccessible or someone not being able to get a hold of them when they wish they could. But for most humans, we recognize that there is a severe problem with this concept or this idea of 24-hour accessibility. Why wouldn't we be? Because it's insane. It is insane to live your life at the constant behest of the phone ring or of the email that just came up or whatever else it might be that could distract you from what's going on, right? From whatever you're actually doing and experiencing, which oftentimes will be very important, even if what you're doing is simply resting, right? Resting is important. Being inaccessible or unavailable is important at times because we are not built or designed or capable of that 24-hour accessibility without having a nervous breakdown, as it often happens. So the first thing that we want to encourage you to do is draw digital boundaries. And in this world where you are now in control of how accessible you are, it can seem almost irresponsible or unreasonable to say there are times when I've drawn a boundary around this. So first of all, every one of your devices or most of your devices will have some kind of do not disturb function. And you need to take up that do not disturb function and figure out how to use it effectively. Some, like with your cell phones, you can even program it to be accessible at certain times of the day. In more advanced schemas, you can design and decide who you'll be accessible to in any given time, so that a call from your wife or your children might come through immediately without question, but a call from a spam solicitor won't even ring, right? You need to draw those digital boundaries and decide, do you pick up the phone at every call? Do you answer every text right away? Do you stop everything for every Instagram notification? Or are you able to limit those or eliminate those as you have been given ability? Additionally, going a step further, you have the opportunity to leave the phone somewhere else. It's shocking. In fact, there's a genuine or legitimate phenomenon where people feel anxiety when they're apart from their phone, and so they feel around, pat around. Oh, I set it over there. Oh goodness! But there's in a progressive Amish community, which I recognize sounds like a contradiction in terms, they even have the habit of putting little, cubbies at the door of their house so that they leave their phone virtually outside. Right? The phone, they use it, they have it for work or whatever it is that they do, but they keep it outside and they don't let that disturb the sanctity of their home. They're unavailable, right? They're at home. So leaving that phone somewhere else, putting it somewhere, turning it off, putting it away is an acceptable thing to do. You need to feel permission. Now, as pastors, we feel like we are always on call, that we're always available. And to some degree, that's true. You don't know when a crisis will arise, right? That you need to go. But we must recognize that those are rather rare, and that there are ways to make yourself accessible to that without making yourself accessible to absolutely every little thing. So you might turn off your phone at a certain time. One one very wise man and mentor of mine said that, he turns off his phone after dinner and he doesn't turn it on again until in the morning after he's had his morning devotion. That means he's totally inaccessible for that time. And that's as it should be. You shouldn't be waking up in the middle of the night and checking your email. That's absurd. You shouldn't be waking up in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning going, let's see what YouTube has to say. That's ridiculous. That's brain poison. So turning off your phone and cultivating a discipline where you turn off that phone during certain times is absolutely critical. Turning your phone on Do Not Disturb during a meeting is just respectful. A one-on-one meeting with someone and you're constantly looking up and checking your phone, your texts, your messages. Why are you taking away your focus from this one spiritual task, this one important task of discipleship or fellowship or planning something for church, and letting your conscience, your attention being divided by every little thing that goes on, and most of which that doesn't even affect you? Turning off unneeded notifications. On your phone, you'll have the opportunity to control notifications, and you can just turn all notifications off for everything. You know when you'll get your text messages? When you look at your phone again. Very rarely do people need that immediate response, right? So changing our attitude towards these things is going to be a way to live a healthier life in relationship to our time management. Finally, consider alternate technology. Some people have, out of respect for the addictiveness of the smartphone, picked up flip phones or technology light phones, or things that will still do the call and messaging function, but won't take up or suck up so much of your time and energy. And it's such an important point to recognize that even a pastor with a great spiritual focus in life can just lose hours on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media, or watching videos and movies, whatever it is that just sucks up time. It doesn't edify, enrich, or encourage. It just kind of slowly uses up time. And it's again, they've hacked our kind of dopamine centers and all that stuff of our brain, so that's certainly something that they want to keep our attention on for their own personal financial reasons and gain. But you, not being unaware of the enemy's schemes, have to be able to take a stand and say, look, if I find myself looking at YouTube too much, there's a way to take that or remove that opportunity from my phone, or maybe remove that whole phone from my existence and stop trying to find ways around it. Limiting your screen time can be done in many ways. If you choose to do that, you can actually, in most phones, you have the opportunity to, put a set amount of screen times, or open up time when you use your phone to do so. So that's my first recommendation on this, is learn to draw those digital boundaries. For someone, it might not even be an issue. It might not be something that bothers them, troubles them terribly. But this will trouble many of us terribly, because, again, the incredible addictiveness of the design, right? They're designed to grab and hold your attention in every way. And that's time that most often can be better spent in simple, contented prayer, in Bible reading, or in something that actually rests and restores you. Whereas those, videos or movies or the, television shows that you now have on demand to watch on your phone don't really enrich or help you rest at all. They simply kind of spend time. So, with that, I want you to consider this new matrix, and this is kind of building upon the previous lesson, so hopefully you've already absorbed that. But we're going to look at dealing with elephants and ants. Elephants, of course, are huge and dangerous, and if they are coming at you, you need to do something about it. And we're using that as a symbol for something that is important, is elephants that are coming towards you, things that are actually able to reach a crisis level, and if you don't do them, there'll be trouble. Now, ants are unimportant tasks, right? They're tiny, and if you see a single ant, you probably don't worry about it. If it's in the wrong place in your house, you might squash it. If it's outside, you just go beyond it, right? So ants, these non-important or unimportant tasks or time demands, time demands, can be coming at you, and one ant is no big deal. However, if you don't deal with ants and then you wind up with 1,000 ants, well, then you might have a problem, right? 1,000 ants can cause all kinds of damage and be even scary if they're the right kind of ants. So this idea of ants and elephants, thinking of your tasks very loosely or the things that come at you, the things that fill your day, as ants and elephants. What is truly important? What do I need to deal with, or else there are consequences, or they're of such importance that they simply need to get done? Or what are your ants? What are the things, that are small issues that seem to run and take so much time? And then on that top axis, we'll encourage you to think of things as the ants or the elephants either charging or walking. So that's rating their urgency. So walking ants are less of a concern than charging ants, right? And similarly, a walking elephant, you have some time to think about that. You have some time to deal with it and figure out the right way to respond. But a charging elephant, you got to deal with right now. You got no choice. You have got to handle that at this moment. So as we use this, we're going to see how we use this matrix in conjunction with a list that we made last week, as well as some of the other issues, to help think about how we deal with the tasks, the relationships, the things in our lives that we want to rightly prioritize. So when you're looking at your charging elephants, you're looking at your crises, right? Your absolute emergencies. And it's well been said that in all the world today, there are probably only 2 actual emergencies going on. You're not going to see, or you're not meant to see, a lot of emergencies. A death or crisis situation, right? A hospital visit that you've been hospitalized, or someone you're close to. Preparing your Sunday sermon on Saturday can become a charging elephant if you're not careful, right? And that's the important thing that we'll see, is that if you don't tend to your walking elephants, they become charging elephants. And if you don't tend to your walking ants, they can become charging ants. They can start to become more urgent with that. A family emergency, things of that sort. So these are things, anything in this category should be something that's out of your control, right? You could not control, presumably, that crisis situation or that, immediate, we need to deal with it now, it's the most important thing in the world, emergency. They will come up. They are there, but you're only going to be well equipped to deal with them if you're dealing with all the other situations in life. Otherwise, you're just making backups on everything else and turning all your walking ants and elephants into charging ants and elephants, and you just get more stressed out, right? So recognizing that if you're living out of this square, if everything in your life feels like you're constantly dealing with emergencies, and there's something that you need to do to change the way you orient to your time management. If everything feels like it's constantly moving into that emergency square, then there's something to be dealt with on that front. So now we talk about not urgent or walking elephants. Walking elephants are still elephants. They're still important, but they are not, if I don't get them done now, there will be immediate consequences. This needs to take up all my ability and all my attention. So things like your personal devotion, your time with your family, your leadership development, your Bible study, and your sermon prep are all in your walking elephants. Don't let yourself or anyone else give you the impression that those are ants. Those are not ants. Those are elephants. Those are important things. Those are the things that you'll look back on your life and say, yeah, that was a worthwhile investment of my time. They'll leave you feeling satisfied if you address them while they're walking. As we've said before, or just said a moment ago, if you don't attend well to your walking elephants, they will become charging elephants. And as anyone who's dealt with elephants will, I'm sure, tell you, charging elephants are more difficult to deal with. So, understanding what's in this this square and giving it the best of your energy is going to be a way to lead a successful and fulfilling life. So that when that charging elephant shows up, you've got means to deal with it because you're not behind on everything else, so that everything feels like an emergency. Next, we move on to charging ants. So a charging ant are incoming phone calls, most text message, emails, social invitations, frequent, this brings about the frequently frantic person. In fact, the frequently frantic person always is, or almost always is, a charging ant. They're this person who's really high strung, they've got all these problems, and you're the one that they're bringing to. You've got to solve all my problems, but just a moment's consideration will make you realize your problems might not be mine to solve. Right? This is not, I can't make myself live in emergency mode because you're living in emergency mode. So as we think of these unimportant these ants that are charging at us, we have to decide which ones do you squish, which one do you distract and deal with in your own time, and which ones do you deal with in the appropriate time. So squishing them and distracting them, like just disregarding them, sending them somewhere else, or ultimately hoping to put them in the time that's appropriate to deal with them, right? You're not always dealing with elephants, hopefully, charging or walking, but when you have finished your walking elephant type tasks, then you're ready to, again, respond to those texts and emails, to answer an incoming phone call, but at a time when you're doing something urgent, like having your quiet time, your devotion, or preparing your sermon, it is perfectly acceptable to set aside all of your charging ants. Finally, we look at your walking ants, and these are your entertainment, your water cooler conversations, your just small talking. Clerical and administration work can be a walking ant, right? It's not all that important or that urgent, but probably should get done eventually. And maybe updating your social media site for your church or for yourself, right? All of these things are not important, not particularly important, and they're not particularly urgent. And so figuring out where things are going to give, well, that's the circle you want things to give in, right? You want to make sure that you've done the things that are urgent and important, obviously urgent and important, and non-urgent and important before you deal with the charging ants, and then make time for those walking ants that, again, could be either squished, distracted, redirected, or just simply put in the appropriate time for you to deal with them, right? So you don't have to live at the behest of a bunch of charging ants. And the interesting thing is that as you learn to deal with ants, you'll find that you have the ability and the freedom to limit how many ants are oncoming. Because the interesting thing is if you put a big pile of sugar in front of you, you're going to deal with a lot of ants. But if you clean up that sugar and you stop being an ant responder, then you'll see that the ants in your life really do fade away, right? Some of those urgent but unimportant things, those calls stop coming in, right? It's kind of like as you set your phone to, if you can set your phone to block all spam calls, before long you start to realize you fall off that list far more effectively than we used to put ourselves on do not call lists and all that nonsense, which was never that effective. But the more you ignore them, the more they kind of go away. And I'm not suggesting that everything that is an ant should be ignored, but a lot of it should. And it is our overdeveloped sense of responsibility or responsibility to people that makes us think, well, I've got to take every call. I can't not. No, you're a person with limitations of your time, of your resources, and you have to live within those limitations, or else you are essentially defying the God who created you. You're claiming to be him, or that he didn't do his job right by giving you only 60 minutes an hour, 24 hours in a day, and so on and so forth. So, how do we deal with elephants is our big question. What do we do to deal with the elephants? They're important, what they need to be dealt with. So first of all, we have to confront them. When it comes to elephants, there is no place for procrastination. We need to be proactive when it comes to elephants, whether they're walking or charging. Certainly when they're charging, right? You have to deal with them right now. But when you're dealing in square two and you're looking at a walking elephant, it's important not to push that off, right? If that's a family concern or a family need, then you need to recognize that you need to confront that right away, right? Rather than hoping that it goes away or ignoring it. You can't ignore elephants. If they're an important task, pushing them off or procrastinating them won't be effective for you. And that's how walking elephants become charging elephants. Next, train your elephants. Which sounds like fun. Sounds like you're in a circus. You train your elephants to know when you are going to attend to them. So whether that's, again, with your schedules, setting aside time in the morning for your devotions, that is absolutely sacrosanct. Nobody touches that, right? Sacred. Nobody touches that time. Or whether that is giving specific time to go on a date with your wife and making sure that you protect that time, or in the time that you choose to invest in your children, right? Train them to know that even a walking elephant needs to be dealt with in the appropriate time. So being able to say with all clarity and honesty and integrity, I'm going to deal with that walking elephant of sermon preparation on Thursday between 1 and 5 p.m. or wherever time slot that you give it. Or I'm going to do my reading on this date, and then I'm going to do my planning on this date and my writing on that date. Whatever it is, or my preparation. So train your elephants to be dealt with proactively when you have the energy and ability to deal with them, so that you're not getting overrun by the emergency situations in your life. And attend to them. Make sure you give them attention. You can't ignore elephants. I'll say it again. You can't ignore elephants. If you do, your life is going to start to feel like it's a shambles. It's going to feel like you're in crisis mode all the time. Or it's going to feel like you're empty because you spend all this time on these piddly little tasks and you don't do the things that are truly important, fulfilling, rewarding, and productive. And you need to do that. You need to put your time where it's going to be productive. Don't let yourself be robbed by not being able to deal with ants. So when it comes to dealing with ants, we obviously have a different way to deal with it. The best plan is to direct them to the time and place when you're ready to deal with them, right? So direct them. Put that little honey or sugar trail so that they go where you need them to go, whether that's in your schedule or just in your emotional energy. Direct them to the place that you're ready to deal with them before they become an elephant situation, before they've built up to the point where they're unmanageable and you just feel overwhelmed by tiny little tasks that you don't want to do or that aren't that important. Distract them, as we said. Ants are really interesting. If you go and drop a stick in the path on the line of ants as they move along, interestingly, while they have all the capability to go over it, they'll oftentimes go around it. And so if you can put a distraction in the middle of an ant task and buy yourself the time to be able to address it in good time, then you're going to be better off. So for instance, if you have someone from the church who comes to you and says, I need to talk to you about the music ministry, and you know that this is based upon, music ministry is very important, but you know that this task is something that's small. So you might say something to distract that and say, I appreciate that. I don't have time to talk about it now. However, I'd like you to come up with 3 solutions or 2 solutions so that when we talk or when we communicate at the appropriate time, that conversation can be more meaningful and productive. Sometimes, it can be as simple as introducing another task into the situation or inviting them to do something different to distract them from that person or that task from its distraction to you. Finally, destroy them. Many ants just must be destroyed. Unimportant things that fill up our lives, that kind of poison our minds, fill our schedule, and keep us from being productive. They just need to be squished. Just squish them, right? Realize that if you've got something on your schedule or something that's taking up inordinate amounts of your time that really doesn't have any effect, that you might be doing it for no reason at all. And don't be that person. So if we look at the full chart as it's filled out, as I've filled it out, right? Yours will be different, of course. We have kind of basically 4 different places where we might live life or spend most of our time. We're going to have to deal with charging elephants. That's just part of reality at times. We're going to deal with walking elephants. There are things that are important to us. They're going to have charging ants, things that demand our attention but really aren't worth our attention. And you're going to have walking ants, things that are of not important or that urgent. And yet oftentimes, that 4th quadrant is the most comfortable to live in because you're just filling your time with things that aren't important. So there's no pressure to succeed or to care or to put effort or energy into it, right? And so it's really easy to live in quadrant 4 because it's so low pressure. It appeals to our laziness. Also, it's easy to live in quadrant 3 with these charging ants because they are or tend to be oftentimes very easy to accomplish tasks. Taking that incoming phone call or answering that text message right away or answering that email right away can feel satisfying. Like, okay, I did something. Boom, little hit. Yes, accomplished something. But what you're accomplishing isn't all that important, right? You can also live in the charging elephants section of life. In fact, if you're not careful, you will live in it. Everything is going to become an emergency, right? Your marriage all of a sudden becomes, in danger because you haven't given it enough attention and energy. Or your family or some of your children become an emergency because you've ignored them. Your Bible study or your sermons begin to fall apart and they're not edifying. The church body's not being edified, and maybe people are starting to notice, right? So everything becomes a burning the midnight oil emergency, and that's just an easy way to have a heart attack, right? The elephants will crush us and flatten our bones. So live in quadrant 1 and you're going to have a heart attack. There's no way to live. You can't live that way. Live in quadrant 3 and you'll get things done, but the things you get done will not be fulfilling or satisfying. Live in quadrant 4 and your life will be given over to dissipation and waste. What's the point? You want to live in quadrant 2. This is the home that you want to have. You want to spend most of your time dealing with the things that are elephants, that are important, before they start charging, right? Giving your energy, your best energy to those things is going to give you the best chance at having a successful life and ministry, right? So dealing with ants in their appropriate time, so they don't build up, the charging ants, dealing with walking ants in their appropriate time and appropriate measure. and giving the best of our time to those things that are most important to us. It's not a complicated thing, I guess, at a level, but it's helpful, hopefully, to think of it in this way and recognize, are you letting the charging ants eat up your life? Are you living under in a world of charging elephants? Is it just one emergency to another? Sometimes it'll feel like that just because that's the nature of life. Things will, catch up or fall down, come down in the perfect storm. But by and large, I want to encourage you to live within that second circle. Figure out what's important and keep it while it's still walking. Deal with it and care for it with the regularity that it's needed, right? So, when it comes to the tyranny of the urgent, I'd like you to read this book, but also to make a similar 4-section grid and labels of the top 2 boxes important and the bottom 2 boxes less important, and the left 2 boxes urgent and the right 2 boxes not urgent, and put your tasks from last week that you wrote up, or make a new set of tasks, right, that based on this week, and figure out where your time is going, and is it important or non-important, and is it urgent or non-urgent, and use that as a rubric with which you can decide whether you're spending your time perfectly wisely or whether you can stand some improvement. And if we're honest, most of us can stand some improvement in that. So with that, I hope that this is helpful in your consideration of what is urgent and what's important, because church life is filled with people who think their situation is urgent when it often is not, because maybe they have time management problems, but also they have faith problems wherein growth is the answer, and the Lord is going to bring the growth through his word, but you're not the one to solve every one of those problems. So it's very important to be able to discern in this way. I hope the Lord blesses you in your study and your continuing work on this course.